While the word relic is often used to refer to any ancient artifact, it means something concrete in the Catholic Church. Relics are parts of the body, or material fragments, associated with saints and blesseds, holy men and women whom Catholics venerate. Every altar where Mass is celebrated will have a relic, most often of a martyr. So, how are they classified? How do churches acquire relics? And what happens to relics in shuttered or abandoned churches that no longer have a home? I'm Cristobal Spielman, O'Hare Fellow for American Media. In this video, we'll explain relics and why these physical objects are so important in the everyday life of Catholics.
I would say that today in the modern world, relics are kind of misunderstood, and many people are questioning whether the church should continue this idea.
Monsignor Robert Sarno is a priest of the Diocese of Brooklyn who worked in the Vatican's Office for the Causes of the Saints for 38 years. Specifically, he studied the lives of candidates for canonization, or sainthood. He's also an expert in relics.
A relic is basically what the word itself says, reliqua. It's a piece of something that is no longer in existence, a small part or a significant part of what is left over, if you will, of the person who has been either beatified or canonized.
The first thing to know about relics is that they're divided into 3 classes, depending on how closely linked they are to the saint's life. First-class relics are those of the literal body of a saint, or from the life of Jesus Christ himself. Second-class relics are those objects that were used regularly in the life of a saint. Third-class relics are those objects that came into contact with a higher-class relic and have a relatively distant connection to the saint's life. Because relics are venerated objects, you might expect to find them in a cathedral or a museum. But in fact, every Catholic church has at least one relic in its main altar. The altar is the central structure of the church, where the holy sacrifice of the Mass is offered by a priest and the worshiping community. Every church is required by church law, which is called canon law, to have a first-class relic of a saint or martyr in the altar.
Here in this altar, as you can see, the relic was put in the base of the altar. Generally, an altar is composed of a base and what we call the mensa, or the table on which Mass is celebrated. So here you can see where the relic has been placed inside the base of the altar, and generally that's what's done. A hole is cut out, the relic is inserted, and then a covering is put with a cross to mark the place, and then it's cemented in so it cannot be easily taken out or desecrated or stolen, if you will.
Canon 1237 states that the ancient tradition of placing relics of martyrs or other saints under a fixed altar is to be preserved according to the norms given in the liturgical books. But what is this ancient tradition? According to the late author Joan Carroll Cruz, in her book Relics, What They Are and Why They Matter, it comes from 2 historical circumstances. The first is that when early Christian churches were built for public display, they were on top of the remains of martyrs and saints who were buried in catacombs and graves. A relic was as much a part of the church as the building itself. Second, the later spread of Christianity through pilgrimages and other means necessitated bringing along relics for those future churches. That practice continues up to today, as new churches are built and require relics for the altar. The communion of saints is diverse, so relics come from many cultures. How they are presented and venerated is influenced by those cultures.
You can see where cultural influences would affect what we call the reliquary, that which contains the relic. This is of Blessed Nicholas Katbamrung, who was the first martyr of Thailand. And it's so very clear the influence, the cultural influence of Thailand upon the reliquary as it was prepared for the Blessed.
When relics are not physically in or under an altar, they're stored and displayed in containers called reliquaries. But the physical insertion of relics into altars is especially significant in the Catholic Church.
The reality is that the relic is there to remind us of the earliest origins of the Church and her celebration of the Eucharist and her memorial, her remembering of these incredible witnesses of the faith who died as martyrs.
So how do individual churches acquire relics? Suppose a diocese is building a new parish church and it needs a relic for the altar. Maybe the church is dedicated to a specific saint, or under the supervision of a religious order tied to the saint. Or maybe there's not even a church requesting a relic. Assume you want to have a relic to venerate your favorite saint. To acquire such a relic, the requester will need to let the bishop in their diocese know about their ask for a relic. The bishop then has the official administrative office, known as a chancery, reach out to the Vatican in order to ask for a relic, often with specifications on the saint requested. But where does the Vatican get these relics for the diocese? Is there a giant warehouse like in Raiders of the Lost Ark filled with the relics of saints to be opened up whenever one is needed?
I won't attempt to answer that barbaric question, but the idea is that there are a few centers that have collections of relics that are available for distribution. For example, one is run by a group of religious sisters, another one is in the Vatican itself, another one is what we call the Diocese of Rome or the Vicariate.
Of these locations, the Lepsanoteca, or reliquary, the same word for the casing surrounding a relic, is the main place, or bank, the Vatican stores relics. If it is not in the Vicariate or one of the other locations, the relic could come from a site dedicated to the veneration of a saint. Acquiring a relic for yourself, provided it is a small relic, is not against canon law, though going through the process to acquire a relic will likely be difficult in comparison to a church using it for an altar or otherwise public veneration.
And we used to spend a lot of time writing back to people and saying, we don't have relics for the distribution to people. So all the relics that are everywhere in the world are under the control, the responsibility of the diocesan bishop, not the Holy See.
It's also the responsibility of a local bishop to oversee the administration of parish churches within his diocese. And many churches in the US today are in decline, with lower mass attendance and fewer priests to serve. That means parishes are merging and buildings are being sold or shuttered. When these parishes close or merge, what happens to the relics within their altars?
That relic should be disposed of properly, and that decision is made by the diocesan bishop. In other words, those who are in charge of those places must consult the diocesan bishop as to what is the best place or the best use of this relic.
When churches merge or close, the bishop can relegate that church to what's called a profane state. That means they are no longer used for worship, and sacred objects like relics are removed. Those relics can end up either at the newly merged church or at a church nearby.
It's not the relic of the church, it's the relic that belongs in the altar, and therefore the diocesan bishop can decide what to do with that if the altar is no longer used for worship. There is no such thing as a desacralization process for relics. You cannot desacralize what is sacred. This is Blessed Sister Maria Rani, who is one of the first women martyrs of India. And you can see the traditional small round, what we call teca, or containers for what is a very small piece of the Blessed there in the center. I'm very close to this because I worked on her cause and I was in India for the beatification. And I had a chance there to talk to her assassin, which probably is the only time I've ever done that in the years I was in the office, to actually speak to someone who had actually killed the servant of God and now blessed.
Relics continue a centuries-old tradition from the earliest practices of the faith, and their continued presence in Catholicism today is part of a complex network of bureaucracy and laws that impact every church from the Vatican on down, from the complete body of a saint to the smallest remainder of their memory.
We believe in the doctrine of the communion of saints. We say it every time we say it in the creed. And what we are basically saying is we're a family. The people in heaven, the people in purgatory, and the people on earth are a family. We love each other, we care about each other, we should pray for each other, and together God hears our prayers.
Thanks for watching. Before you go, hit that subscribe button to follow our channel. If you like this video, the best way to keep supporting us is to become a subscriber to America. You can do that at americamagazine.org/subscribe.